in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our Take the Pain Out of T&E Expense Reporting for Microsoft Dynamics NAV webinar. My name is Michael Introvertolo, and I'm the Accounts and Marketing Manager here at Solution Systems. Today we are very fortunate to have CV Sudarshan with us from Gorilla Expense, and he's going to be conducting this overview. But before we get started, I just want to point out that I'll be live tweeting key points during this entire webinar with the hashtag Gorilla Solution. So if you'd like to tweet us or follow us, just take a look at the bottom of your screen and you'll see our Twitter handle. It's @solution_system. And with all that being said, I'm going to pass it over to CV so he can get started.
Great, thank you, Michael, and good morning, good afternoon, and maybe even good evening, depending on your time zone. Welcome to today's webinar on taking the pain out of T&E expense reporting for Microsoft Dynamics NAV. We're happy to be presenting this solution with Solution Systems, and what I have today is an overview of the product itself, but I'll just give you an introduction about us. We'll talk about some of the pain points with a manual expense reporting process, which nobody likes. And then we'll talk about the why now, and the how when it comes to expense reporting, and follow that up with a demo of the solution itself. We'll touch upon as many best practices and ideas that have worked for our clients when it comes to automating this process. At Gorilla Expense itself, I'm one of the product managers, and I work a lot with clients from a demo standpoint in terms of understanding their requirements and also partners. So hope you find this information to be useful, and logistically, if you're not able to hear me or see my screen, please let us know and we'll definitely find out what's going on. So just to introduce Gorilla Expense to all of you, very experienced in expense reporting space. As the company's name suggests, we understand what works and what doesn't, and we realize that it's a very challenging and a cumbersome process, and that's really the pain point that we solve with our solution. Our mission in life itself is to become the de facto spend management solution that provides robust visibility to decision makers in the company, and we have the T&E product, which we'll look at today, and besides that we have a timesheet product specifically for jobs and so on, and also a purchase card reconciliation solution for NAV. So if you have a P card that you use for general office expenses or even travel expenses, we can input that data and then reconcile it to NAV. In terms of validation and industry recognition, a few years ago, Microsoft sponsored us. They liked what we did with our product, and they said, go showcase what you're doing. And they gave us that opportunity at the demo conference, which was held in the San Francisco Bay Area a few years back. So definitely, it's been a good journey so far, and being blessed by Microsoft is always a wonderful thing. Let's talk about some of the pain points with an expense reporting process, especially one with Excel and Scotch tape. And I'll just get this out of the way, which is universal fact number 17. Nobody likes expense reports, right? A stack of receipts that you have to reconcile, code, attach it to line item expenses. It's always rife with errors, and it's never timely. It's cumbersome. So a lot of pain points, and of course, the solution to those pain points provide tremendous amount of savings to a company. What are some of the key areas? Well, we call this the Excel and Scotch tape pain points, right? First of all, it's manual and it's just a hassle. In today's world of technology and mobile solutions for pretty much everything, you really want to get away from a manual approach. Secondly, lack of control. For companies that are looking to maintain policies, they're looking to get a better handle on how they're spending, an Excel-based solution just doesn't quite make it. Error-prone, right? We all know this. You submit expenses with receipts, but there are mistakes because they're not done in a timely manner, and they have to be fixed, and they go back and forth between the travelers, the managers, accounting. Poor visibility for some of the key decision makers, CFOs, controllers. They really don't have a real-time visibility into spend because the data itself is compiled much after the travel or the trip, so that makes it a challenge. And finally, this can become an emotive subject depending on the type of travel that your company undertakes, right? If you have travelers on the road all the time, especially salespeople, and they're focused on the business, focused on closing deals, the last thing they want to worry about is expenses and receipts. But on the other hand, from a financial standpoint, you do have to collect that data. You do have to submit them, report them. So it is important. So that leads to a very tricky situation between the travelers and, of course, from an accounting standpoint. So how do you solve all of these, right? The obvious answer is to automate this process and make it much easier to manage. Let's talk about why automating T&E. And this is from a quote from one of our friends at CFO.com. And basically what they said is T&E expenses are second only to payroll in terms of discretionary spend for a company. And as costs continue to climb, companies are increasingly paying attention towards getting a better handle on this. And the best part is if it's managed well, it can be controlled. So essentially what they're saying is if this is an area of an improvement that you've identified, then by focusing on it and solving it, you can put money back into the company's pocket. The follow-up to this question is why now? Well, the 21st century, we're here. And this provides us with a lot of tools, a lot of capabilities. Firstly, we're in the middle of a mobile revolution where literally everybody has a smartphone, and the smartphones, they do everything, right? Phone, obviously, texting, emails, CRM systems. Why not expenses? It's almost a no-brainer. You combine that with the cloud solution, which is one of the models that we provide, which is data and the application itself being accessible anywhere, anytime. It's very powerful. You combine that with the software as a service or the subscription business model, it starts to make a lot of economical sense, right? It's pay as you go. It's very attractive, very economical to own today. You flip a switch, it's on. You don't want to use it anymore, you flip a switch, it's turned off. It takes care of the classic, old school CapEx debate that, many companies had to justify. Not anymore. You can get started pretty easily and quickly. And finally, you combine that with the integration piece, right? Most systems today have APIs, have connectors that let systems talk to each other, and that makes it very powerful, especially from an accounting side. You have corporate credit cards, you have expenses that need to be reimbursed, maybe they need to go to a payroll system, then the data needs to be reconciled into NAV. So there's a lot of system-related data transfer that needs to happen, and by automating it and connecting these systems together, it makes it much more easier to manage. And the amount of time that people would spend reconciling it and correcting it and keying in data is pretty much eliminated. So, which means your accounting team can now spend time focusing on other important things. Sounds interesting, right? The natural question then is, well, what are some of the numbers? If you can automate all of it, what benefits do you get? So here is some numbers provided by one of the research groups, and they compared what it takes to process an expense report in an entirely manual process versus different levels of automation all the way to the last line on this table, which shows a fully automated and integrated system. And basically, it's more than 3 times expensive to process an expense report manually versus using an automated system. And the way they calculated this number was based on amount of time it takes for employees to do expenses, managers to approve, accounting to review, check, fix, then key in the data, late credit card fee payments, right? If you have a corporate credit card and expenses don't get reconciled on time, you're still going to pay that late fee. And then also they factored in costs for mailing in receipts. Many companies still put receipts in an envelope and they FedEx it in. That adds dollars pretty quickly, and you'll be surprised to see some of the numbers it comes to. So all of that factored in leads us to these kinds of numbers. Some of the bigger pieces, which really depends on your business process, are also compliance related, right? Like policies. If you don't have a real-time way to track expenses, then most of the time the expenses will be out of policy. Meals expense will show up for $60, $80, $100, but it's not tracked in real time. It's too late, so you end up paying for it. So if you factor all that in, the savings can be pretty huge for companies. So how do you automate it? What's the first step you take? This looks interesting. It looks like a great plan, but what's the first step to jump in? Well, that's where our solution comes in a fully automated and integrated format. So the diagram that I'm showing you is kind of end-to-end automation with our system. Within the dotted box is our expense solution. Travelers can submit expenses on the web. We support multiple browsers. They can They can submit expenses from their mobile smartphones. We work with iPhones, iPads, Android phones. And then we can also import the credit card data into the application. So if you have a corporate credit card, Amex, MasterCard, or Visa, we can pull that in and then make respective transactions available to the respective employees for them to reconcile, like attach receipts and code it and then submit it. And with the credit cards, depending on the format or the program that you have, that process can be completely automated. So the credit card company will supply the data to us on a periodic basis, typically daily, and then we'll send it to the users almost instantaneously, and then they'll just have that expense in front of them. They'll most likely have the receipt with them at that time. They'll just snap a picture and attach it. We also have an email expense source, which is if you have an email in your inbox from a merchant, let's say Delta Airlines, the normal process today is users will print that email and then take a picture of it, or they'll print that email and then attach that to a paper expense report. Using our email feature, what you can do is just forward that email to us, to Gorilla Expense, and the application will create a transaction for you. It might not be complete, but most of the work will be done, and it'll use whatever receipt was attached in that email, a PDF receipt. It'll use that as a receipt in our system. If your email does not have an attachment, then the application will make a PDF of the body of the email and then attach that as a receipt. So it's another option to bring an expense into our application very easily from your inbox. And we take it one step further where these email expenses and these corporate card expenses can be pulled into an expense report on the phone, and you can also submit out-of-pocket expenses from the mobile app. So you can gather all of them together, put it into a report on the phone, and submit that entire expense report from there. So you don't have to get in front of a computer. So 100% mobility is the goal. But we do provide the option of creating and submitting expenses on the web as well. It's entirely a user preference. Some users, believe it or not, prefer to do it on the web, while most of them prefer to just complete it on the phone when they're on the road. And then built into the web application are alerts. Whenever an expense report is submitted, employees or managers are notified via email. There's multiple levels of managers you can set up for them to approve expense reports. And you can also redirect or route expense reports to other managers if needed. We also provide a standard analytics and reporting module. The analytics module lets you query expenses, expense reports, all the data in the system. We keep the data for a minimum of 7 years in our subscription model, and you can access that anytime. You can also download PDFs with the expense data and the receipts for your backup, so plenty of options available. Reporting is just a list of canned reports we provide as part of the system. You can query or run reports by expense type, by employees, by location, by merchants, just slicing and dicing of data that helps you make better decisions when it comes to T&E spend. We have a Sunshine Act module, which is really an add-on module that we provide. This is really more for pharmaceutical, medical device, and biotech companies. They're required to comply with the Sunshine Act, which is part of the Affordable Care Act. So they have to capture the doctor's NPI number for every transaction, whether they've taken a doctor out to lunch or dinner or whatever it might be. So we have a module that lets them do that. Just quickly jumping outside of the dotted box, we can also pull in data into our system from a third party like a travel booking system. So typically the booking company or the travel management company will supply the data to us in a standard CSV or Excel file, and we'll import that and make it available to the respective traveler for them to incorporate that into an expense report. So that's data coming in, an example. Data going out of our system would be like a payroll system. So if you're using a third party disparate payroll system like ADP or Paylocity or whoever it might be, we can generate a flat file that you can export out of Gorilla Expense and import into the payroll system to reimburse employees. So that's available as an option. And finally, once all the expense report data has been compiled, gathered, and approved through all levels, then with the click of a button, we can push the data into NAV. And you might be reimbursing employees from within NAV as well, so that's supported. Typically in that case, you'll have employees set up as vendors within NAV, and we'll push the data to the respective vendor number to pay them. We work with multiple versions of NAV, 2009 all the way to 2015, and also the newer versions which are coming up. So all of that is supported. The integration into NAV itself, we have several flavors that we work with. So we can do a purchase journal integration, we can do purchase invoices, we can do a general journal integration, and also we do job-based integration as well. So within purchase invoice, if you track expenses by jobs, we can tag the job number against an expense line item, and that'll get mapped to NAV. For some of you out there that have a modified version of NAV using Ceramic Navigator, typically for nonprofits or companies that track expenses by funds or entities, we support that as well. So we have a slightly different integration for NAV that has Ceramic Navigator. So as you can see, plenty of options to select from. So we're going to see most of these modules in action today during the demo. So I'll start with a mobile demo. I'll show you our mobile application, and we'll rinse and repeat that on the web, and then get an expense report ready to be pushed to one of the versions of NAV that I have in our demo application. So let's start with a mobile demo. I'll address these shaded sections here. We'll look at the mobile app. We'll look at a couple of credit card expenses on the phone, and then also look at an email expense from the phone, and then submit an entire expense report from the phone. And then we'll look at that process similarly from the web. So I'm going to segue from my PowerPoint and then pull up my phone, and while I do that, I'm going to pause for a second to make sure you're still able to see my phone. If not, please let me know. Okay, so you should see my iPhone live, and I've logged into Gorilla Expense Pro. And for this demo, let's just ignore the timesheets. We'll just focus on the expense side. And for prospective clients that are looking at only expenses, we can disable the timesheets module, so you'll only see the expense side of it. If I click on the expenses button, it gives me three options at the bottom, as you can see: mobile, bank, and email. And in the background diagram, you can see those are the three boxes from the solution diagram that we'll look through. So I'll work my way from right to left. I'll start on the email tab, and I have a bunch of expenses that I had sent to Gorilla Expense from my email, and I'm going to pick one of these examples. Just pick the first one. So the way the process works is I created an email in my inbox, and I sent that email to email@gorillaexpense.com. In the subject line of the email, I put in some comments, and then I threw in a PDF attachment as a receipt, and I clicked on send. So it's created this transaction for me. The PDF icon just shows me the example PDF receipt that I attached, and this is just a sample. And then at the transaction level, there's multiple fields that I can now fill towards completing this line item expense. And many of these fields are configurable to your requirements. So if you don't do project or job-based tracking, we can disable like a project field. If you have additional dimensions that you track at the expense line item and where the employee can potentially change those values, we can set up those dimension values on the transaction level. So for example, if department is a dimension, then the user can go in and pick a department from a list. And each of these will have the department dimension code tied to it in the back end, in the admin account. So in my case, my department is sales. I'm going to leave that as a default department, so it's going to use that code. I'm not going to do project tracking on this expense, but I can, if I want, I can pick from a list of projects and also a list of project or job tasks as well, if I need to. The expense type, I've already selected that. And I was working on this expense before. I picked airfare as the expense type. And each of these expense types has the account code tied to it in the back end. Now we have a concept called role or work group, where if you have, let's say 1,000 accounts in your chart of accounts, and your salesperson only going to use 10 of those for expenses, then we can define a sales role, associate just those 10 expense types to that role, and then tie that role to those sales employees. So they'll only see expense types that apply to them. So I have the master role in this case, so I have all combinations of expense types in my case in this demo application. So I'm going to leave it as airfare. It's picked the date already, which is the date when the email was sent, and then I used some keywords in the body of the email. I said total space 60, so it's put $60 as the total amount. And then for clients that are based or that have offices in Canada or Europe, we also capture tax reclaim amounts. So GST, HST, or different VATs, we can set up the application to capture that. And there's a tax table feature where automatically once you select the location, it'll calculate the tax amount, the reclaim amount, and fill that field. In this case, I don't have any tax rates set up for the airfare expense type and for location, which is Georgia, so it's just going to leave that blank. We also support multi-currency, so if you have travelers going outside of the country, you can set up different currencies in the system. You can also upload exchange rates into the application. As another option, we can also tie to a third-party system like xe.com to pull in exchange rates periodically. So that's also available. The merchant field, I already selected Delta Airlines, but this just gives you a list of merchants to pick from. Your Starbucks, McDonald's, Hilton, Delta, those are the names you would see here. This is an optional field. We can disable this field if it's not of interest, but we recommend you keep it because if you're going to start tracking expenses automatically using an automated system, it's beneficial to know which merchant that expense is tagged to. So you'll get a better, you get better visibility into how much you're spending on Delta Airlines versus Southwest, for example. And many of our clients will use that data to get a better corporate deal if you have a corporate deal with one of these carriers. So there are plenty of savings benefits to have this. So I'm just going to leave this as Delta Airlines. And then there's a payment method field. So this is what classifies an expense as reimbursable or not. So personal card or cash basically means it's a reimbursable expense. The other options available are corporate cards. So Amex is the corporate card that I use internally, and if I flag this expense as Amex, it'll say it's non-reimbursable. But that's something that I typically would not do because my Amex charges show up on a different page on the mobile app, and they'll be pre-filled with Amex as the payment method anyway. So I'm going to label this as personal card because that's exactly what it was. And then country, state, city, as you probably can see, these are pre-filled. There's a default page on the mobile app where you can set default values for different fields. And I've just defaulted country, state, and city to these values, so they show up as filled. And then below that, I have comments, additional comments. I also have a coworkers field where I can pick other coworkers from a list, especially for like a meals, or a taxi expense type, or if other employees were part of it, you can just pick them from a list and add them to that transaction. It just provides more visibility to the approving manager. So this expense looks complete. I'm going to save it and I'm going to upload it. So the process of upload is it's just going to upload that expense, and uploaded expenses can then be added to a report. You can do that, we can do that right now, or the traveler can do that on a daily or weekly basis. So just periodically they would add expenses to a report, and then at the end of the week or end of the month they would just submit that report. So this approach encourages the traveler to complete their expenses as soon as they're incurred. So if you have a receipt in front of you, send it to us, upload it, and your work is done. And then you can pull them into a report at a later point. So we have one there. I'll jump to the bank tab. This is where it'll show me any pending corporate card expenses, and as you can see I have a bunch of those. The yellow invalid flag means that some of the data is missing in that expense, but for the most part, depending on your credit card program, your corporate credit card program, the transaction will show up as complete. So I'll pick one of these examples. Let's pick this Chipotle one. So this is the way the transaction is going to show up from the credit card company. So it's going to have the date, the amount. I'll come back to the expense type in a second. It'll have the date, the amount, it'll have the merchant name. The payment method, as you can see, is already defaulted to Amex, which is my corporate card payment method. Now, in the back end, this payment method, Amex, has the vendor number of American Express tied to it. from an NAV perspective. So when you push this to NAV, it'll send this amount, it'll tie that to American Express's vendor number. And then, of course, country, state, city, and then comments is additional comments provided by the credit card company to our application. So we have a mapping keyword system where, based on the comments supplied by the credit card company, which, as you can see in this case, is Chipotle, and then the zip code and the city, our application will read this, and based on what it reads here, it'll automatically select a merchant name and an expense type for the user. So it's read Chipotle, and it's picked the merchant is Chipotle, and it's already picked the expense type as meals. So there is some intelligence from a credit card reconciliation standpoint. So it's really, from a traveler's perspective, when these transactions show up, the only thing that'll be missing is the receipt. So they can go in here and they can attach a receipt to this expense. They can pick a receipt from the photo gallery of the device, or the receipt's in front of them. They can take a picture of it using the camera. They can attach a multi-page PDF receipt from their Dropbox account because we sync with Dropbox. And finally, they can also merge a PDF receipt from the email. So coming back to my previous example, if you've used your corporate credit card on delta.com to book a flight, then Delta's going to send you an email as a receipt, and most likely you're going to forward that email to Gorilla Expense for it to create a transaction for you. So you're going to have one line item in the email tab that we saw a few minutes ago. At the same time, your corporate card statement is also going to have a line item for that charge from Delta Airlines. So now you have two transactions within our application, but they're both the same. So by using the merge from email, you can tell the application to merge that PDF receipt from the email into this corporate card expense, and tell the application they're both the same, and then you can just delete that email expense. So it makes it very convenient to combine receipts. I'm just going to go to the photo gallery. I'm going to pick an example receipt that I have in my travel folder, and I'll click on Save, and I'm going to upload this expense. So we have a corporate card expense ready to be added to our expense report. All right, that's done. And you'll notice that the status for that is now saved on device and web. And what that means is this expense can be added to an expense report either on the phone or the web. All right, so let's jump to the final tab, which is mobile. This is where the traveler would create out-of-pocket expenses. And you would do that by clicking on Options, and there are two options to create expenses. The first one is Create Expense, which will just open up the page like we saw before with all the fields that the user would fill. The second option is an add-on feature that we provide, which uses our OCR engine, which is optical character recognition, and it's called Receipt Scan. So if I pick that, I can take a picture of a receipt. I can say use it. So it's going to upload that receipt. It's going to scan it, extract the data from that receipt, and complete as much of that expense for me as possible. So it's scanning, and it takes anywhere from a couple of minutes to 10 minutes depending on the quality of the receipt and the quality of the upload speed. So a few seconds before this demo, I took a picture of the same receipt. So let's see if it's finished scanning that, and it has. So you can see it gives me the scanned result. So let me open up that expense. It's showing an invalid flag just because the expense type is not selected yet. So let me click on Edit, and we can look at the receipt if we need to. So it shows $102 at the UPS store on the 18th of September 2015, and that's where it's captured. It's picked the date, it's picked the amount, it's picked the merchant name, and the rest of the fields come from my default profile. So the only thing I need to do is say, hey, this was a Visa expense type. That's it. I'll save it, and I'll upload it. So that's really how simple it is to submit an out-of-pocket expense using our OCR engine. So that's one flavor. The other flavor is a mileage expense type. So for that, I'll click on Create Expense, and I'll pick mileage as the expense type. And once I pick mileage, you'll notice that this page changes in appearance. It now has a number of miles field, and it's pulled in the rate per mile from my user profile, which is set up in the admin account in Gorilla Expense. and it's 0.575 for me. You can have different rates for different employees, but that's really not typical. If I click on the number of miles, I can either key in the number of miles if I know what that is, or better yet, I can use Google Maps to do the math for me. So I can click on calculate miles, and then I'll type in a start address, and then I'll type in an end. And it's going to show me that it's 454.57 miles. So I'll say done. I'll say save, and it now shows me that value in the number of miles field, and then the converted amount, which is $261. And then in the comments field, it'll just type in the start and the end addresses for reference. Again, this is useful for an approving manager to see what this mileage expense was about. So very simple, very easy. The receipt itself for a mileage expense type is just a snapshot of Google Maps that we saw. So I'll say save, and I'm going to upload this. And obviously I want to come back home. So for the round trip, what I can do is I can just copy this expense and just change the date on it. So let's say I'm going to come back tomorrow. I can create that expense right now. I'll pick 23rd. I'll go into the number of miles field, and now you can see a reverse address button as well. So if I click on that, it's just going to reverse it back from Tampa to Atlanta, and I'll say done, save it. So you can see how simple it is. There you go. So we have a bunch of expenses we've just created and that we've uploaded. And the next step is to add this to a report and submit them. So I'll go back to the home page of the app. I'll click on reports, and I'll give this a name. Let's just say this is Solution Systems Webinar Demo. And then the report type, there's multiple report types we can configure depending on your operations. The corporate or travel report type is just a generic report type. Again, the naming convention for these report types that you're looking at can be user-defined, can be anything you like. So corporate is like the standard report type. Project is job or project-related tracking. If you do that, it's a different report type. Pre-trip is an add-on module that we provide for pre-trip approvals. And then aggregate spend, like we briefly discussed, is really for the Sunshine Act clients. It's a different report type altogether. So for this demo, I'm just going to pick corporate as a report type. I'll pick a start date. Let's go a month wide. Actually, let me go to the 23rd because I had a mileage expense for tomorrow. And then currently in the demo application, it's being configured to present me with a cash advance field. But if you don't have cash advances, we can disable that. And then at the report level, we provide a comments and additional comments field as well. So I'm going to save this report. This looks good. It creates a skeleton report. I'll click on it. And now I can add those line item expenses that we just uploaded into this report. So I'll do that by clicking on the Add Existing Transactions at the bottom right. So here you have the mileage expenses and then one transport expense. The reason it didn't show me the $102 from UPS is because it's outside of the date range. So if I want to add that to the report, I can just say, well, let's just make this the 17th of September. And then save that. And now you'll see the fees, which is the second line you can see for $102. So based on the date range, the application will filter the results and show you only relevant expenses that need to, that fall within that date range. So let's just add all three of these. I'll click on Add. It's going to drop it into the report. And then I'm going to jump to the bank tab. We had one expense that we uploaded, right? The $9.27. I'm going to click on that and add that to the report. And then we had one expense on the email tab for $60. I'll tap on that, click on Add. So here you have 5 expenses, different sources, different expense types, and as you can see, we can combine out-of-pocket and corporate card expenses within one report in our system. You don't have to create separate reports. You can if you want to from a business process standpoint, but our system doesn't mandate that. And at the bottom, it shows me the total amount, what is not reimbursable, and then of course what is reimbursable back to the employee, which is $684.90. So this report looks complete to me. I'm going to click on validate. It's going to make sure that everything's within the date range and, make sure things are valid. And only then is going to give me the submit button, which you can see at the bottom left. So I'll click on submit. And now an email will be sent to Tim, who is my approving manager. That says CV has submitted a report. It's so-and-so amount, so-and-so date range, and the report confirmation number is GE1454. Every report in our system has a unique confirmation number. And using that confirmation number, you can go in and query the data. So for example, if you want to go look at this report 5 years from now, you can use that number, go in and look at all the expense data, look at all the receipts, everything's available to you. We keep the data, in our subscription model, we keep the data in our system for a minimum of 7 years, but we can keep it longer. But at any given time, you have access to all the data. And we also do an on-premise licensed model where you can buy the software and own it outright. So both options are available from a business model standpoint. So that report is submitted. And from a traveler's perspective, our work is done. So just to quickly summarize what we've seen, the main advantages with the mobile app are completing expenses with receipts without having to get in front of a computer. And we bring in expenses from different places into one point, right? Your corporate card, just like we saw, your out-of-pocket expenses, your corporate card expenses, and email expenses. All of them are conveniently available in one place. The app itself, as you can see, is very simple, very easy to use. We have several clients that have salespeople who love this app, so that itself is a great testament that the app does a wonderful job. And it's not a science project kind of an app. And the app, from a transaction standpoint, it has a lot of detail in it, right? It's not just a blob of receipts. You can have additional fields. You can have a mandatory business purpose field that we can enable for you if you want a business purpose for every expense line item. So there's a lot of configuration options. And finally, obviously I have a log out button at the bottom in the app. But if you don't log out of the app, then the app also works in an offline mode. So if you're sitting on the plane and you don't have connectivity, you can still create expense. You can attach receipts to them, and you can keep them ready. You can't upload them, you can't submit them just yet. You can do that once you have connectivity, but the bulk of the work is done even in an offline mode. So no more delays with expenses or missing receipts, right? So we've seen the mobile app. Let's look at the web application, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to approve this expense report that we just submitted from my phone. And we'll talk about some of the other points on the web and then get that report ready to be pushed to NAV. So we'll touch upon as many points within these shaded sections, and then if we have time at the end, we can come back and basically dive deeper. So I'm going to log in as Tim, who is my approving manager. Now, the web application is obviously a fixed URL that you would go to. It's the same username and password for the mobile and the web. And then once you log into the application, you're presented with the dashboard. You have the key functions at the top, and then the expense section itself is broken up into 2 subsections: expense reports that Tim is working on as a traveler, which is the top half, and below that are expense reports submitted to Tim for approval by CV. So this is the one we just submitted. I'll click on CV's name. It's going to open up this report, and we're looking at this as a manager now. So from a manager standpoint, you can view all the data in the application, including the receipts. So I can click on this airfare expense. Probably not the best example because it's a PDF receipt. Let me look at another one. Let's click on this. So that's the fees receipt. So you can see it very clearly shows me the receipt. I can click on the expense type itself. It's going to give me the details. For the corporate card expense, it shows me the comments supplied by the credit card company. So pretty much everything that the manager needs to review and take action is available to the manager. And once the manager has reviewed all this data, they can choose to approve or reject this report and type in the comments one way or the other. The second option is the manager can also redirect expense reports to other managers in the system. So as you can see at the top, there's a progress bar that shows you where the expense report is. And if you have multiple levels of manager approvals, you'll see additional bubbles with the respective managers' names below that. I have just one level in this demo application. But if I redirect, let's say I have multiple levels, let's say 2 more levels after this, and if I redirect this expense report to Carlos at this point, so it'll be sent to Carlos. Once Carlos approves it, it'll come back to this point, and the expense report will continue its journey forward towards final approval. So that's available as well. If you do job-based tracking, then we can set up the job owner or the project manager as one of the approvers in the workflow. The third option, which is a very powerful option, especially for accounting and AP type users, is you can edit the report as well. So if you set up multiple levels of approvals, we recommend that you have AP or accounting be the final approver before the data is pushed to NAV. So when they get the report, if they see an error, if an expense type is miscoded or a date is incorrect, things like that, if they need to be fixed, then the AP manager can click on Edit Report and they can make changes. So for example, I can say this Delta Airlines expense really should have been the 17th of October, not the 19th. So I can change the date and I'll save it. But since I've changed something within the expense report, I have to revalidate it to make sure that I have not broken any rules. So I'll do that. It says everything is valid. And when I go back, when I click on Back to Review Expense Report, it's now changed the date to the 17th. So you can keep the report moving forward by fixing errors. If there are many errors, if many things need to be fixed, obviously you can just reject this report and tell the employee to fix whatever that needs to be fixed. But you have the option of making changes if needed. So this report looks good. I am going to approve this report, and now an email will be sent back to the employee that says Tim has approved this report, and now it's with accounting. On this page, there are a couple more features. I'll come back to that once we've sent this expense report into NAV, so we can just continue with the flow. Now this report number is GE1454, so let's keep that in mind as we send this expense report into NAV, which is the next step. We're going to use our integration app, which is the connecting device between our application and NAV. And like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we have multiple NAV integration options: purchase journals, general journals, purchase invoices, based on your requirements. We can set it up to connect to any of those pages. In my demo application, I believe I have NAV 2009, and it's a purchase journal integration. So I'm going to open up NAV and just set that aside. If you're not able to see my screen or NAV, please let me know and we can find out what's going on. All right, I'm going to set it aside, and I'm going to open up our integration app. So that's the NAV integration. For those of you that have NAV along with Serenic Navigator, that's a different radio button for that. I'm going to log in. As you can see, I'm logging in as an admin type user. So this is typically available only to admins who would be accounting or finance or AP. This is also installed on the same server typically as NAV. So log into the integration app. The Gorilla integration app does many things, but we'll focus on exporting expense reports. So I'll click on Export Expenses. It's going to give me the screen where there's a list of expense reports submitted by different employees at different times, but all of them are manager approved. Only manager approved reports will show up here. We're going to pick this report. This is the one we just worked on. I'll pick the next status in the workflow, and then click on Update Selected, and the data should get posted within NAV. That's really how simple it is. From a process standpoint, you can come into this app and you can select all of these reports by clicking on Select All and send everything into NAV with just one click of a button. And you could do that on a weekly, bi-weekly, bi-monthly, or maybe even monthly basis. So this is one of the options that we have. The other option is a automated export. It's like a scheduled export. So every Friday at 5 p.m., the integration app will automatically push manager-approved reports into NAV. So you have both options. You can pick one or the other. Even though the automated scheduled import, or I should say scheduled export, is really cool, many of our clients like this just because even though an expense report is manager-approved, sometimes they'll realize at the last minute that something needs to be fixed. So they can quickly go into the admin account, fix the report, and then push it into NAV. So it gives you a little bit more control on when you push the data. All right, let's go find this report and the data within NAV. The demo application has been set up to do a purchase journal integration. So I'm going to go into NAV, and there's a journal batch name called Gorilla, which has all of our data. And if I scroll down all the way to the bottom, here you have all the line item expenses from our expense report. As you can see, it shows it's created these as invoice line items. It'll take the report number and it'll put a digit after that just for the number of transactions. And then it automatically pulled in the account number, and then it shows a report number in the description field along with the merchant name. And that's something we can map as part of the integration app settings. And it shows the amounts, and of course the vendor number, it maps that automatically based on the payment method. So these two are the mileage expenses, and it's mapped my vendor number, as you can see, because those are reimbursable expenses. The Chipotle expense, if you remember, was a corporate card expense, so the vendor number in that case is American Express, which is our corporate card. So at the end of the term, which might be weekly or at the end of 2 weeks or end of the month, you would just post this batch to create expense line items and to issue a payment line to the respective vendor within NAV. If I come back to the integration app, since we've successfully sent this through, if I reload this page, this expense report would have disappeared from the list. And there it is, it's gone. Similarly, did I just lose my screen share? Oh, there it is, okay. So as you can see, 1454 is gone. Similarly, if I come back to the web application, and this was the last confirmation page we left, if I refresh this page, you see it still says manager approved. If I refresh this page, it'll now show me AP approved. And the Audit Trail, which is available to all the users in the system, provides a running summary of what's been going on with this expense report with a date and a timestamp of all the triggering events. So it's going to show me when did I submit this expense report with a date and a timestamp, when did Tim, my manager, approve it, and then when did accounting approve it. And at the line item level, it's going to show me when I added transactions to the report and so on. For this particular expense, as you can see, it shows I had originally submitted this as the 19th of October, and Tim changed the date to the 17th. Today at 2:42 p.m. Eastern Time, which is what we did. So that's handy, in terms of providing visibility to everybody involved with this process. And finally, also at the report level, you can run a PDF preview. This just gives you a PDF of the expense report with all the data in it and the receipts as well. So it's a very convenient document. So it shows a table with the expense data and then the receipts. You'll see the respective expense type and the date correlated as well. So you can save this PDF, and it's just a very handy backup document that you can have. And typically for our clients, we'll put your logo up here so it looks like an internal document. So there are several other features that we can look at, but what I'd like to do is just quickly wrap up the presentation and open up the floor to any questions. So what we've reviewed so far, right? We've seen or discussed the pain points of T&E. We looked at how easy it is to manage expense electronically, right? It's a very simple, very intuitive solution that really does the job for everybody, travelers, managers, and accounting. We sent the data to NAV with the click of a button. We can always go back now and run analytics, run reports, get more visibility after the fact. Even though we've captured the expense data on a timely basis, you know, my CFO might want to know how much we've spent with Southwest so far. So all that data is available in the system. And there's a lot of flexibility. There's a lot of convenience with this approach. And many of our clients, they find that receipt management is improved, compliance is improved, and you know the process is just a hassle to do it on Excel and you know taping receipts. It's just it's a very ancient process. With some of the newer technologies that are available today, all of that pain you know can be mitigated. So with that, I'd like to open up the floor to any questions. So let me actually put it on my final slide page, and I'll transfer it back to you, Michael.
Sounds good, CV. All right, yeah. If anybody has any quick questions, you're welcome to type them in the chat feature for GoToWebinar. Otherwise, you can contact CV, and you can see his contact information is on the screen. And CV, you know, I want to thank you. It seems like a you know, a wonderful solution that's basically bringing travel and entertainment expense reporting into the 21st century. You know, like you said, you know, like you said, Excel is a little bit dated.
Yep, absolutely, and it's not a very cumbersome process from in terms of user adoption as well. The solution flows really well from end to end, so really everybody benefits.
Definitely. All right, it doesn't look like there's any questions. Let me switch it on over to this screen. All right, if you happen to come up with any questions, you are, right there, welcome to contact me. My contact information is on the screen, and if it's something that I can't answer, I will definitely get in touch with CV, and we will, you know, 100% for sure come up with an answer for you. My phone number is 847-590-3000, extension 295, and my email is michaeli@solsys.com. Once again, I want to thank CV for presenting this for us, and I want to thank everybody for attending.
Great, thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. You too. Take care, CV.
Yep. Bye now.